The Adeptus Custodes are more than the simple golden bodyguards of the Emperor of Mankind. Within the Imperium, the Custodian Guard is the supreme military force in the entire galaxy. Very few things can match the incredible power of the Adeptus Custodes. The shining golden warriors known as the Adeptus Custodes are the elite bodyguard of the Emperor himself. Their word is law and their might in battle unsurpassed even amongst the ranks of the Space Marines. Striding resplendent and fearless through the fog of war, they bring hope to the embattled civilizations of mankind and swift death to their enemies. We all know that a Space Marine is forged from the gene seed of their Primarchs, but the Custodian Guard are fashioned from that of the Emperor. His greatness runs in their veins, gives them stature and strength far beyond human limits. A portion of his willpower is breathed into them, and it protects their minds against the corruption of chaos. Unlike Space Marines that implant their neophytes with gene seed during or right before puberty, the Adeptus Custodes use a mysterious form of genetic alteration called gene crafting. They manipulate a 1-year-old cellular structure and genome in order to transform the child into a demigod we know as a custodian. How long this process takes and how the Emperor's biological makeup is used to create these warriors is surprisingly clearly understood, but it's a heavily guarded secret. From the extensive psychological and cognitive conditioning to the physical and mental rework of the recruit, the entire process was created by the Emperor himself, and since the Unification War, the ordeal is only known to an extremely select few. To get more info on the process of a Custode's creation, please check out our 40 facts on the creation of an Adeptus Custode. I'll put a link up above. So trusted and respected have been these warriors that those that fell during the Great Crusade have their names inscribed on the interior surface of the Emperor's armor. These are warriors entrusted with more authority than any other Imperial agent, for they speak on behalf of the Imperial Palace. Small wonder that these figures of legend inspire awe in the armies of the Imperium, and even the Space Marines kneel in their presence. Each of the Custodian Guard is a champion possessed of incredible martial skill and garbed in the finest personal war gear the Imperium can provide. He fights as an army of one, more than capable of cutting down a squad of heretical Astartes or a charging mob of orcs over the course of a few blood-soaked minutes. The Guardian Spear and the Sentinel Blade used by these Golden Warriors incorporate not only powerful disruption fields that can cleave adamantium, but also inbuilt bolters that can shatter a battle line at range. Their Baroque armor can turn aside powerful blades, for each represents the pinnacle of tech artificer's art. On the rare occasion that one of these warriors is laid low, he may then be interned into a mighty Contemptor Dreadnought, a walking effigy of destruction that can rip open the war machines of the enemy with power fist and blazing cannons. The Custodian Guard typically deploys straight into battle via the most blessed of teleportarium arrays, appearing in a blaze of pure white light to strike with the force of a lightning storm. But when they need to redeploy at speed, they use ancient land raiders that have served the Imperium faithfully for millennia. A single Custodian Guard can rip through an enemy fortification on a killing rampage. A whole army can collapse an entire battlefront. Heroes all, they engage the champions and sorcerers of the most heinous foes without a flicker of doubt, for they know that righteousness, strength, and indomitable will can overcome even the direst threats. But for all their magnificence, there is a hereditary blight on the otherwise glorious history of the Adeptus Custodes, a scar of disgrace that could never truly heal. At the end of the Horus Heresy, the War Master Horus all but slew the Master of Mankind, and the Custodian Guard, though they fought with every bit of strength and bravery, failed in their duty. They took to wearing cloaks of black cloth in order to mark the mournful day, and for thousands of years they bore the stain of defeat without as within. However, since the return of the Primarch Guilliman, the outlook of the Adeptus Custodes has changed. Although they will forever be the Emperor's guardians, now their duty lies at their gates and beyond. Many of the Adeptus Custodes have sailed forth into the galaxy once more, reforging their legends by smiting those who would bring harm to Holy Terra before they have even taken to their ships. Now let's take a look at the creation and the recruitment of the Adeptus Custodes. The Emperor of Mankind perfected the process of creating his Custodian Guard before he solidified the creation of the Space Marines. And while the two warriors were created to perform very similar functions in his Imperium, their recruitment and training shared many similarities. Both are physically transformed well beyond natural human limits in terms of strength, endurance, and fortitude, and fitted for inhuman environmental adaptation and resilience, though in this the Adeptus Custodes are the remarkably superior of the two in might, if not in adaptability. Both are subject to extensive psychological and cognitive conditioning to render most of their baser drives inert, and their beings rechanneled towards aggression, goal acquisition, and the fulfillment of duty. As a further safeguard against distraction and as biological control, both are of course incapable of procreation. In both cases, all that is left is a being of singular purpose. In the case of each Astarte, what is created is a living engine of conquest that cares for little else. And in the Custodian Guard, each is created protector of unrelenting diligence and savage capability, a watchman whose vigilance will never tire. What also truly differs between the two warriors is not just their functional purpose, but the extent of their augmentation and the means by which it is accomplished. While the process through which the Adeptus Astartes are fabricated from a human being is well documented in its outline, though its details are of course rightly held secret by those parties involved in the process on a chapter-to-chapter basis, genuine facts about the manner in which the Custodian Guard are created are very few, even within the hands of the Imperium's hierarchy. This is because, as with all else about the Custodian Guard, it is a matter for the imperial household alone, and that authority is one that none can change or question. What is known, however, marks them as different. Firstly, there is the matter of the age of the candidacy. For a child to become one of the Adeptus Custodes, it is known that they must begin the process in their late infancy, and certainly before adolescence has taken hold of their physical structure. This stands in stark contrast to the Space Marines, whose implantation with the gene seed is only possible after adolescence and best served before full physical maturity. This may link to a second of the few known facts about the creation of the Adeptus Custodes, that the genecraft and the alchemistry that transforms them is as absolute as it is subtle, and worked upon the smallest conceivable microscopic level of their genome and cellular structure. It is a process that effects such change on the mortal human form that when complete, unless they suffer such massive bodily harm as to forcibly end their lives, they are effectively immortal, without perceivable aging taking place after full maturity. And compared to the Adeptus Custodes, the Space Marine surgical grafting and organ implantations appear as crude and primitive procedures, for what creates the Custodians is as invisible as it is potent, worked upon the core genetics and at a deep cellular level, and perhaps tailored for each specific inductee. There are those who insist that so invisible and yet so powerful this process is, that it crosses over into a metaphysical realm of biomancy and psychic manipulation on a level unguessed at. Given that it is said that the Emperor himself has overseen the creation of every single Custodian Guard who has ever lived, this may be true. It is a widely held belief that in each Adeptus Custodes runs the blood of the Emperor himself. In their eyes, the Custodian Guard is to the Emperor what the Space Marines are to the Primarchs. This has been questioned by many Imperial savants, claiming that the true genetic material was developed before the Unification Wars, and proof of its origin was destroyed long ago. Regardless of the speculation, the legal Custodes are unmatched. The peerless warriors who then result from this archaic process are a rare breed indeed, and not to be squandered recklessly on the battlefield. They were created with a single purpose in mind, to be the Emperor's own elite guard. They were a force created both to defend the Emperor from physical harm wherever the Great Crusade might take him, to stand watch over his private domains and most guarded secrets, and to serve as the direct agents of his will, as his personal emissaries, be that will be to protect, to venture, to claim, to keep secret, or to execute without remorse. Now let's take a look at one of the most important Adeptus Custodes, the Captain Generals. Unlike the Space Marines or the Astra Militarum, the Adeptus Custodes do not follow a rigid hierarchy or have a standard chain of command. Instead, each custodian is viewed as his own military champion, rather than just a simple soldier. While each custodian does adopt a functional title for a specific chosen role, for the most part, they possess a roughly equivalent status to one another. There are a few exceptions to this, as any military organization needs a strong singular commander. For the Adeptus Custodes, this senior rank is known as the Captain General. The Captain General personally oversees the actions of the 10,000 and acts as the ritual proxy for the Emperor himself. His command is treated as the voice of the Master of Mankind. He is in charge of security of the Imperial Palace, and on many occasions, the Captain Generals of the past have been chosen to serve amongst the ruling High Lords of Terra on the Senatorum Imperialis. But above the politics and the defense of humanity, the Captain General's most important role is commanding the elite corps of the 300. Known as Companions, they actually serve the Emperor as his personal bodyguards within the sacred chamber of the Sanctum Sanctorum. As the highest authority within the Adeptus Custodes, it is up to the Captain General's discretion to see who will have access to the Emperor. His sacred duty has been inherited for over 10,000 Terran years, and only the most skilled and trusted custodians will be chosen to take up such an important role. One of the Adeptus Custodes' most notable Captain Generals was the Chief Custodian, Beyruth. Beyruth served sometime during the 32nd millennium, and was leading the 300 when the inner sanctum of the Imperial Palace was invaded by a Harlequin trope of the Joyful Tears. Beyruth successfully led the defense of the throne room against the would-be interlopers, though at the cost of more than a dozen Adeptus Custodes. Only the Shadowseer Lariel Ray and the Death Jester Bo managed to reach the outer chamber which led to the Golden Throne. They were intent on meeting with the Emperor. The Death Jester was killed, and the Shadowseer was pinned to the ground. Lariel insisted that the Elder had come in peace in order to deliver a message from Farseer Eldrith Ulthran, but the Captain General refused to acknowledge her pleas. As he was about to order the death of the upstart Xenos, the Captain General was halted by a timely intervention of Inquisitor Lord Veritas, who was interested in interrogating the Eldar. Most Imperial records on the subsequent Captain Generals of the Adeptus Custodes are completely concealed. A few mysterious data slates exist of the Captain General, Asoth Kumudro, who served between the 33rd and the 39th millennium. The reports state that when warning from Halo Belt augurs revealed a Spacehawk advancing toward Holy Terra, the Captain General managed to use his position as a High Lord to eclipse the Imperial Navy's objections and order a strike of several shield companies on the now named ominous Skiff Space Hulk. Those outside the Adeptus Custodes did not understand the significance of the action, but the attack was led by the Lock Warden of the Shadowkeepers and a band of his black armored comrades. The ominous gift was successfully destroyed, yet the wider Imperium never was informed of what was found inside that Space Hulk. Unfortunately for the Adeptus Custodes, the next custodian to take up the title of Captain General was Chief Custodian Galahoth. It might have been the corruptive influence of power that creeped into the Captain General's mind, or perhaps it was his conservative ideals that prevented Galahoth from accepting the counsel of his diverse tribune. But under his leadership, the Adeptus Custodes witnessed terrible stagnation. They heavily relied on the powerful and precognitive psych or sex known as Doomscryers, which used their power to search the tides of the warp for warnings and indications of future threats. Ironically, without warning, Galahoth went missing, and his mysterious disappearance heralded a terrible time called the Years of Madness, when strange omens and ominous whispers engulfed Holy Terra. Attempting to battle the stagnation that Galahoth left behind, the new Captain General, Andros, faced a shocking increase in cult activity throughout the Sol system. Doomsday sects triggered Q-wars between the pilgrim tribes within the Emperor's palace, and the custodians were forced to exercise their authority in the bloodiest fights they had seen in centuries. Reports from the Dark Cells cited a growing sensation of agitation amongst the hidden inmates, and numerous support servitors had to be destroyed by the Shadowkeepers after they exhibited sudden, violent madness. Worse was to follow as possession was revealed amongst the subsects of the Doomscryers themselves, though not until the false predictions of the fallen Psychers sent Captain General Andros to his death in the Battle of the Gilded Pyre. It was amidst this climate of spiraling paranoia and danger that the current Captain General, Trajan Valoris, elevated to command the 10,000. Many claim that Valoris is the greatest champion to hold the title since the Emperor walked amongst man. Within his first solar decade of service, Valoris ran not just one, but 2 successful blood games, a record that remains unbroken. With his incredible grasp of battlefield strategies and his naturally aggressive streak, he earned a place for himself amongst the Alaris custodians. There Valoris won many names from deeds such as the destruction of the Space Hulk, Morphul Iron, and the defeat of the Genestealer cult of the Emperor's Withering Shadow, and his spearheading of the preemptive strike against Walk Crush Fist. If Valoris showed a weakness, it was his reluctance to stand back and wait for his enemies to come to him. He lasted only 22 Terran years amongst the companions before his desire to participate in a more proactive strategy of defense saw him reassigned. He gained the rank of Shield Captain soon afterwards, and spent several standard centuries leading sorties against the emergent threats throughout the Sol system and beyond. Valoris became well known for his tendency to observe his enemies carefully, predicting their movements, then delivering a sudden and decisive blow. He cultivated networks of agents and informants across the Segmentum Solar, and even further out into the wider Imperium. Valoris recognized his own tendency towards aggressive action, and took constant steps to temper it with comprehensive foreknowledge. Thus his strikes always fell where they should, and no commander was ever lost due to a reckless command. He showed the same amount of resolve as a Captain General, increasing the number of blood games, strengthening the warp routes into the Sol system, and under his leadership, the Adeptus Custodes enjoyed the most proactive century of martial and covert action since the fall of Goch Van Dyer. They annihilated dozens of hidden cults, purged the polar underhives, eliminated a Vermilion classified Xeno threat amongst the Plutonian void fortresses, and launched 32 separate extrasolar interdiction strikes. It is even rumored that Valoris knew about the restoration of the Primarch Gilliman before it even happened. When word reached Terra of two demigods battling on the surface of Luna, the Captain General had already laid the groundwork required for the Adeptus Custodes to adapt to the new Imperium that the Master of Ultramar would create. Shortly after Gilliman's return and the creation of the Great Rift, Valoris and his Adeptus Custodes had to enact the Catastrophe Protocols to defend Holy Terra from the hordes of coronet demons that burst through the thin veil of reality. With unshakable calm and self-assurance, Valoris and his men met the invaders alongside Gilliman's Ultramarines and a sizable complement of the Sisters of Silence. During this time, which we recorded as the Second Battle of Terra, the Custodians successfully deflected the Blood God's attempt to behead the Imperium with a single strike. Victory was brought at a steep price, however, but it is a victory nonetheless. Valoris would continue his proactive purge of the enemies of mankind during the Battle of Galthamor, when the system came under attack from the heretical Astartes of the Wordbearer's Traitor Legion. As the Dark Apostle summoned creatures from beyond the veil, the fight turned viciously against the Imperial defenders. The Mordian 84th Regiment of the Astra Militarum and the Sisters of the Order of the Argent Shroud dug in to stage their last stand in the grim ruins of Galthamor Prime's Macrocathedrum. Their prayers for salvation rang out to the screaming skies above. Sure enough, even as hordes of traitors and abominations mobilized to attack, the Emperor answered the cries of his followers. Teleport flares erupted through the heretical lines. Gold and silver lightning leaped out as a combined force of Custodians and Grey Knights stormed into battle. Bolters roar and crackling blades tore through heretical flash. Valoris and Grandmaster Voldos led an assault that saw the traitor army shattered into battling warbands. Inspired by the sudden arrival of the demigods, the Mordian and the Sisters of Battle advanced. After 3 solar days and nights of complete savagery, the Chaos host was broken at the Battle of the Statue Steps, with fresh Imperial reinforcements flooding into the wider Galthamor war zones. The Custodians set course for Terra, leaving the Grey Knights to conduct a grim purge of the unfortunates they rescued from the Macrocathedrum, for they had seen too much of chaos, and they could not be trusted. But of all the brave and powerful Custodians to take the title of Captain General, none could be as venerated as Constantine Valdor. Few warriors in the entire history of the Imperium have even come close to the martial magnificence, selfless dedication, and strategic excellence of Constantine Valdor, the first Chief Custodian and Captain General of the ancient Legal Custodes, the elite bodyguard of the Emperor of Mankind. He was a powerful warrior and a being of supernatural stature and honor. Many compare him to one of the Primarchs of the Space Marine Legions, and that he could even match one of the Emperor's sons in a contest of blades. Records of his existence predate any of the Primarch's creation, as with many of the Legal Custodes, who were the Emperor's firstborn genetically augmented warriors. Such were his fighting skills, martial power, physical and mental abilities, that there were those even within the Imperial Court that dared to call him Primarch in all but name. Yet for all his power, Valdor was made and trained to serve a different and far more focused purpose, that of Lord Commander of the Custodian Guard, and to Valdor, the petty concerns of conquest and glory, dominion and victory were as nothing when compared to his own sworn duty. Yet Valdor's value to the Emperor was so much more than just a mere combatant. From the early days of the Unification Wars, perhaps even before, Constantine Valdor was the Emperor's staunch companion, and his loyalty to the Master of Mankind was absolute. The Captain General would rather have taken his own life than risk that of the Emperor. Valdor's devotion to his master was such that there was no act he could not perform, no deed he could not consider to ensure the Emperor's continued survival. So while Constantine Valdor held a rank in some ways higher than even that of the Primarchs, and sat at the center of the imperial power of Terra, he seldom exercised his influence, and when action was required, it was never to further his own agenda. But should his purpose be challenged, worse yet, should anyone or anything seek to endanger the Emperor or his chosen representatives, Valdor was a demigod of vengeance made incarnate, unstoppable and unrelenting. Constantine Valdor faithfully served the Emperor of Mankind from the Unification Wars, the Great Crusade, and the dark days of the Horus Heresy, in which he was active during some of the most significant events and campaigns that took place during the Age of Darkness, including the burning of Prospero and the Battle of Terra. On Prospero, Valdor eventually faced 30 of Magnus the Red's elite blade masters, warriors who could predict their enemies' attacks through psychic precognition, slaying them all and receiving only a single wound in the process. During the final Titanic siege on Terra, the Legal Custodes fought alongside the Loyalist legions to defend the Emperor and his palace. They showed no mercy to the turncoat Space Marines. They did not waver, even as megatons of explosive death rained from the burning skies, even as demonic abominations spilled through the veil of reality, and Chaos Titans hammered the palace walls with city-leveling weaponry. Valdor and his 10,000 fought valiantly during the nightmarish battle, driving back one offensive after another. The Captain General was seen to reave through the ranks of the traitor legions as easily as his loyalist cousins would against ordinary humans and lesser Xenos. During this final battle of the Horus Heresy, the unthinkable would happen. At the culmination of the Siege of Terra, the Emperor led a last-ditch boarding action against Horus's battle barge, the Vengeful Spirit, where he met the Arch-Traitor in single combat and defeated him at last. But the cost was appalling. When teleported onto the Vengeful Spirit, Constantine Valdor was separated from the Emperor, as Horus planned all along. Though they cut down traitors and demons beyond count, Valdor and his fellow Legal Custodes were unable to prevent Horus from mortally wounding the Emperor, and leaving his father's mind and soul trapped in a shattered husk of a body. Grief-stricken, the Custodians bore their master back to Terra, there to be interned forevermore within the machineries of the Golden Throne. They swore a penitent oath and donned the mourning black, consigning themselves to watching over his fallen lord for the rest of time. Following the failure of the War Master's assault upon Terra, the Emperor's surviving loyalist sons led a ferocious war of vengeance, which came to be known as the Great Scouring, in which they hounded the fleeing traitor legions across the galaxy. Yet the newly reorganized Adeptus Custodes took no part in this time of violent retribution, standing their somber watch upon the throne world and contemplating their ultimate failure. Though records conflict as to how and when, it is during this period that Captain General Constantine Valdor disappeared from Imperial history, along with weapons and armor which never made their way to the Hall of Armaments. The Custodians elected Valdor's successor from amongst their ranks and continued their watch. The final fate of Constantine Valdor is unknown, but there are those who believe that he serves the Emperor still.
Now let's take a look at one of the most important factions within the Adeptus Custodes, the Solar Watch.
The Sol system is amongst the most heavily fortified of mankind's stellar holdings. That's because that is the home of Terra and the center or the core of humanity. The Adeptus Custodes consider its worlds, star forts, and space lanes as an extension of their master's palace, and so they ensure that they are guarded accordingly. From the vast orbital fortresses of Luna to the cloud keeps of Jupiter and the deep space forts of the Halo Belt, humanity maintains hundreds of strongholds throughout the Sol system. Billions of weapons point menacingly into the dark gulf of space, ready to unleash spectacular devastation upon any enemy foolish enough to threaten mankind's seat of power. Armored towers and gargoyle-covered bastions loom over each approach, sanctified against the foul machinations of the Emperor's many foes. Entire fleets of Imperial ships prowl the space lanes, vigilant of the slightest threat. Yet perhaps the most formidable of all of Terra's outer defenses are the Custodians of the Solar Watch. Consisting of several shield companies of varying strength, the Solar Watch swears binding oaths to keep guard over the outer bastions of the throne world. They see themselves as the first true line of defense for the Imperial Palace, and they believe that it is their duty to ensure that no external